DNB has recently updated its supervisory strategy to cover the years 2021 to 2024. In this video, I will shortly explain the focus areas of our supervision for the coming years. However, these are risks that we think warrant extra attention. So when new risks emerge or a crisis erupts, as the outbreak of coronavirus did last year, we will of course adjust our supervisory attention accordingly to deal with these new risks. A lot of our attention as of late therefore still goes to the economic impact of the corona crisis on the financial sector, where we keep a close watch on, for instance, liquidity risk and credit risk. This approach is summarized as risk-based supervision, of which I will explain a bit more shortly. So how does this work? Supervision is aimed at compliance with laws and regulations. Financial institutions, and you as their employee, are responsible for fulfilling promises made to customers and for preventing involvement in financial and economic crime. We, as a supervisory authority, we check whether institutions comply with the legal requirements. Our supervision then consists of two pillars. First of all, prudential supervision, and second, integrity supervision. Prudential supervision aims to ensure the soundness of financial institutions and a stable financial system. So we see to it that institutions can make good on their promises, for example, by paying pension benefits, by safekeeping saving, or as an insurer by covering risks. Integrity supervision aims to ensure an honest financial sector by strictly checking that institutions adequately prevent financial and economic crime. We choose to deploy our supervisory capacity where the risks are greatest. This works as follows. We first categorize institutions in impact classes, depending on the tolerance for failure of this institution. So for example, tolerance for failure for a big bank is very low because the impact on financial stability and trust in the financial sector would be too great to allow such a bank to fail. Another example, for a small asset manager, the impact on trust and financial stability would be a lot smaller were it to fail. So the intensity of our supervision is less for a small asset manager. We then follow a basis program of supervision for each institution, which may be extended with a risk-based program if risks at certain institutions are perceived to be worthy of further investigation or intervention. So this is the basis of our work. We look at risk categories such as credit risk and liquidity risk. When the corona crisis broke out, the first focus was ensuring that financial institutions had enough liquidity, and credit risk, of course, also got increased attention. The next couple of years, institutions will still have to deal with the economic impact of the crisis, especially when government support for the economy is gradually reduced from this year or the next. However, there are also a number of structural challenges for the financial sector we look at. For instance, the business models of financial institutions are changing, whereby they and technology companies are increasingly converging. So tech companies are offering financial services, whereas financial service providers are more and more going online. And the corona crisis has even accelerated this trend to digital. This means that boundaries between supervised entities, such as a bank or an insurer, and non-supervised entities, tech companies, are blurring, whereby large parts of, for instance, back office services critical to a financial institution are outsourced to third parties. A second structural challenge is for the financial sector to finance the transition to a sustainable economy. There are plenty of opportunities and a big financing need to finance this transition. However, at the same time, there is a need for adequate management of climate and environmental risks. Another structural challenge is the persistently low interest rates, which may be a feature of the coming decade. Already the past decades has seen a gradual but persistent falling of interest rates across the world. This hurts institutions a lot. For instance, banks need to become more resilient by making their business model less dependent on interest income. The challenge for insurers in the coming years will be to achieve sufficient returns and to pay out the benefits they have promised. Also, new business selling new insurance policies with high premiums and low returns will be hard for life insurers. For pension funds, the new system no longer commits to pension entitlements, thus shifting risks to the participants. However, in the coming years, this will call for clear communication and implementation of a future-proof contract that works if interest rates stay low. And finally, another challenge is institutions are faced with changing prudential legislation. As an example, for investment firms, the introduction of the Investment Firm Directive, the IFD, and the Investment Firm Regulation, the IFR, leads to prudential requirements that are more risk-sensitive and proportionate. There's also big changes expected in EU regulation. Among other things, the European Commission will be introducing the Digital Operational Resilience Act. This includes safeguards to ensure that information security is in order and that oversight on critical service providers, such as cloud service providers, is regulated. I will come back to this later. The European Commission is also working on a new anti-money laundering framework and a European Supervisory Authority in this area. So, I'm on my last slide now. In this slide, you will see what we do on top of our regular bread and butter type supervision. And here we highlight 3 areas of extra attention. First, new technologies and digitalization are causing fundamental changes in the financial sector, as I just explained. Because of this, the data of financial institutions must be in order in terms of quality, in terms of security, and in terms of use. Good data are also essential to the strategic direction of institutions. Institutions increasingly transfer their data and IT processes to third parties that are not supervised by DNB or other supervisory authorities. However, institutions themselves always remain responsible for data security and compliance with regulations at all times. It's also something that the DORA Act I just explained will see to. We pay particular attention to a specific form of outsourcing, where IT processes run on cloud service provider service. By doing this can create dependency of financial institutions on third parties, whereby the continued soundness and operation of financial institutions is more and more reliant on unsupervised service providers. In the coming years, we will therefore monitor whether these outsourcings comply with the outsourcing guidelines published by the EBA and IOPA. We will also invest in improved use of data in supervision. It is our ambition to handle as many standard reports as possible digitally and to work with institutions on the responsible use of new technologies, for instance, artificial intelligence. Also, communication and collaboration will increasingly be done digitally. The corona crisis has even made this quicker than we anticipated, and we don't foresee a return to the old ways of communicating after the corona crisis has receded. The second area is commitment to sustainability and future orientation. Managing sustainability risks is essential to a future-oriented business model. That is why, first of all, supervision aims for a firmer anchoring of sustainability in risk management at institutions. Secondly, we are also working in Europe on robust financial regulation regarding sustainability. Thirdly, reinforcing institutions' capacity for change is a focus area. A lack of capacity for change often reveals itself slowly, but will gradually erode a business model. In light of the persistently low interest rates, which I highlighted before, there is less margin for institutions to wait and see what happens. Adaptability is very important. And the third and last extra area of our supervision attention is combating financial and economic crime. This will see an extra impulse in supervisory capacity. Financial and economic crime includes money laundering, corruption, terrorist financing, sanction violations, and fraud. Since the Netherlands has a very well-developed financial system with great connectivity to the international financial system, criminals would very much like to use our financial system. For instance, to launder money obtained in drug trafficking or through fraud. Financial institutions therefore really need to know their customer to make sure our financial system is not misused. We therefore need to fight more. In recent years, institutions have further strengthened their gatekeeper role and invested in human and other resources to keep criminals out of our financial system. At the same time, there's still much room for improvement to the structural performance of the gatekeeper function. Secondly, we need to fight smarter. We, DNB, contribute to public-private partnerships in the fight against financial and economic crime. And we also encourage private collaborative initiatives to keep criminals out of the sector. One example of this is the partnership of Dutch banks called Transaction Monitoring Netherlands, TMNL. In TMNL, from this year, the participating banks will jointly monitor transactions to increase detection of suspicious transactions, and also to make it easier to follow up on them by the relevant authorities. And thirdly, we need to fight better internationally. Financial and economic crime is an international problem, which also calls for cooperation across national borders. Effective supervision requires equal effort and identical interpretation of the standards framework by supervisors, because criminals will try to seek out the lightest supervisory regime, moving the problem to specific countries. That is why we are committed to an effective approach at the international level. So, that was a brief introduction to the supervisory themes of DNB. If you want to read more in depth of the themes I highlighted, you can go to the DNB website, where you can find our supervisory strategy for 2021-2024. Thank you for watching.